Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to another episode of the Traverse the Stars podcast third season. Hi, my loyal listeners. Thank you for your continued support. This is an amazing episode because Geoffrey Thorne boards the mothership to discuss Green Lantern and the Blood Syndicate. Now, come aboard as we go traversing the stars. Hi, Mr. Thorne. Thank you so much for coming to the Traverse the Stars podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
Totally my pleasure. Like I said, I've been a fan of yours since back at Green Lantern, which was a fantastic comic book, so thank you so much for doing it.
Oh my God, you're the one. No, well, it was literally my pleasure, despite some of the bumps in the ride. I had so much fun making that.
And I will say I'm a hardcore Green Lantern fan. Anyone who has ever watched the show, no, I always brag about having every Green Lantern comic book going back to Silver Age.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's every single one, including spin-offs, miniseries, offshoot series. And I think you did a wonderful job, especially with John Stewart, and you really made him really one of the foremost Green Lanterns now in the entire mythos. So what was that like?
Well, I mean, John has been around since the early 70s, and because he's a secondary character, um, he's had, like the life of all secondary characters, crazy stuff has happened to him throughout that time, but it's always in service of the other guy's story. So
Mm.
no one has to really pay any deep attention to it. But I was like, well, during the run created by the guy we shall not mention, um, some pretty wacky stuff happened to John that's never been addressed. And I was like, is no one going to address this? Is no one going to address this for decades? I'm a big comic book fan too, quite as big as you, but I've been following this stuff for decades and decades. Like, is no one ever going to pick up this thread? Right. So being allowed to, in some way, pick those threads up and resolve some of them, not all of them, sadly, but some of them, it was a bizarre, out of nowhere, completely like, oh, okay, great, let's go. I had nothing but fun with those artists, and the editorial craziness that was going on backstage didn't really have anything to do with us. It was just what was going on at the company at the time.
Hmm.
So none of it really, I mean, I guess we felt the influence of some of it, but on the whole, we just were doing our thing, man. We had a really good time. Marco, who I would have never met for this project, is like a great artist that I now know. And Tom Rainey, whose work I'd loved since, I guess, back when he did like a one shot of the Silver Surfer or something. Like, I want to work with that guy one day. So I got to. So it was like, you can't really have enough, you can't have anything bad to say about the experience. I had a good time.
So as one of the creators, people have worked on John Stewart. You're gonna have to answer the question that seems that everyone has to answer about John Stewart. Is he more the soldier or more the architect?
The architect thing is where he started. He was an architect and an activist. And because of a change to his character that was made in the cartoon, the comic books for many years were like, oh, he's this military guy. He's a sniper. He's the one who's ruthless enough to murder a friend if necessary. And I was like, so, I mean, I would have taken him towards architect more aggressively. But you have to sort of start with the cards that are on the table. And on the table, John was pretty deep in his I'm a Marine persona that had been established by the company. I would say architect. He's a builder. And it's not a coincidence that again, that arc that shall not be named, um, that's what he became, the master builder, right? So at the end of what would have been a three arc storyline, he would have become that,
Hmm.
some version of that. But you had to go through to get there. You can't just go, okay, now I'm on the book. He's the builder now. Forget all that crap. You know, can't do that. So I would say architect. I would say architect. He's a person who wants to add things and make the world better than how he found it.
And you definitely increased his stature. I mean, you basically made him a god of Green Lantern, a Green Lantern.
Well, yeah, that was not the plan. That's just where we had to stop. Well, okay. So yeah, what I wanted to do, the thing that I don't like about generally in modern comics, and it's a corporate decision, and I think many people, many comic book fans will agree, while in a given story, it's fun to have the Flash family or the Superman family, or God forbid, the Spider family. what it ultimately does, it takes away from the uniqueness of the central character. If there's 9,000 Spider-Mans, why do I care about what's going on with Peter when I can choose one of the billion other spiders to follow? Right now, from a corporate point of view, that's like, great, we're widening our audience. Let's get more people in here, But from the point of view of character sort of longevity and why we like them in the first place, you're removing Peter's uniqueness. If he's not the only one, or one of maybe two, you're diluting the product. So with that in mind, I felt, and I think a lot of Green Lantern fans feel, regardless of my antipathy for Hal Jordan specifically, there's too many human Green Lanterns. There's just too many. It doesn't make sense that there would be so many humans in just Hal's lifetime, not even his whole lifetime, in like the last 10 years of Hal Jordan's life. Like 9,000 other guys are also Green Lantern. It doesn't make any sense. So my whole part of my agenda was, once I got put on it as the full-on Green Lantern writer, because I was initially just going to be writing about John Stewart, I was like, well, let's do something about all these human lanterns. There's so many of them, Now, again, and as a fan, not the biggest Hal Jordan fan, as has been well documented, but as a professional, the company's never getting rid of Hal. So there's no choice. Hal's going to, if they're going to be two Green Lanterns left, Hal's going to be one of them.
Yeah.
He just is, deal with it. Sorry about it. Right. So that's fine. Who's the other one going to be if there's going to be two? Now, the company I guess they wanted Joe Mullane to come over from Far Sector. Great. I wanted John to be off doing John stuff. It doesn't mean he's going to be out of he's not going to be out of the Green Lantern mythology. He's not going to be out of the Green Lantern book, but he's no longer going to be a Green Lantern, in the same way that Alan Scott is not a Green Lantern, in the same way that Jade is not a Green Lantern. Well, for a minute she was, but not really. And in the same way that Kid Lantern is absolutely not a freaking Green Lantern. So you can have these people with these powers and these characters that come in and out of the universe and are integral to it without killing the uniqueness of your central figure, which ultimately is why I think everyone was so angry at me, because I don't like Hal, because they identify Hal as the Green Lantern. And I'm like, I don't necessarily disagree with that. But in order for him to be the Green Lantern, all these other folks got to not be Green Lantern. They got to be something else than Green Lantern. If we had gotten to do all three arcs, Kyle would have been something else. John would have been something else. We saw what happened to Jessica. She would have been a Yellow Lantern. Simon would have been something else. And Kelly absolutely would not have been a Green Lantern, right? So Guy would have stayed a Green Lantern. He would have been he would have been a different kind of Green Lantern than you're used to, but he would have been very much a Green Lantern. Obviously, Hal's Green Lantern, and they wanted Joe, so Joe's a Green Lantern. That would have been the way that they were Green Lanterns would have been subtly different, so there wouldn't have been the kind of overlap that you see, where it's like, well, all these guys have the same abilities. They're all from the United States in the same period. There's not even an old one. Like, there's not even you know what I mean? They're all roughly the same age. Like, Hal might be the oldest, but he's only oldest by like maybe a decade. Like, so this way it's not as cluttered. And yet you can still have the characters interacting and doing stuff and being necessary to the plot. But you have to have editorial and corporate sort of energy behind that move, or it won't stick. So
yeah, I kind of feel like with Green Lanterns, there's always like an arms race. With every time someone takes over, it's like Hal Jordan can now create his own ring from scratch. Kyle Rayner was Ion, right? And it's like, I mean, why do you think I think Green Lanterns more than others have been defined by how much power they have versus how much character they have.
I agree with that, and I think it's a fixation and a problem that's rife in comics in general. And I'm saying this, and people go, "But didn't you just elevate John to some ridiculously high power status?" And I'm like, in chapter 1, yes, and you only ever got to see chapter 1, so sorry about it. Talk to my bosses. We didn't get to finish that storyline out, but yeah, it's a problem, because in your story, while you're on the book, if you max out the power set, it's great for the arc you're telling,
Yeah.
But then who does your guy can't fight Galactus every week? Because no, you can, but nobody cares because it's Galactus every week, right? Like it's
Right.
not right. It's not epic if it's all the time.
I kind of well, I will say I did love the run, but I think after a while it got a little tiresome. I loved what Jeff Johns did with Green Lantern, but I feel like at some point they got to the point where it was like they fought the Black Lanterns, then they fought the guy who was like the creator of all the Green Lanterns. You know, like the guy from a god was like every
Yeah,
series was this epic
because it
cosmic
was so
adventure. It was like
big all the time.
right, I was like you got to slow down once in a while and give him a you got to fight the guy robbing a bank once in a while.
Yeah, well, remember a lot of the fans were like, "Can he come back to Earth for 5 minutes? Can he
Right.
have anything going on Earth where he fights criminals and does Justice League stuff? No, he must fight Galactus every week. You know, the source wall must be destroyed. You know, like everything has to happen." And I'm like, you leave yourself nowhere to go.
Right.
And listen, again, antipathy. I don't know Jeff Johns. I have no feelings about Jeff one way or the
Yeah.
other. I've liked a lot of his work, and I've not liked a lot of his work as a fan. But what he did for Green Lantern, as a long-term Green Lantern fan, you would know that. You would have to know this. Green Lantern was at absolute best a B-tier hero after the big four, like the Flash,
Yeah.
Superman, Batman, and I guess Wonder Woman, although sales don't really bear that out, they would consider her part of that big trinity. And then below that would be Hawkman, Green Lantern, the Atom, people like that. That was Green Lantern's fate for decades. And then Jeff John comes along and he does some pretty impressive world building around Hal Jordan,
Mhm.
right? That's where you get all the different Lantern cores and, you know, the Parallax not really being Hal and all of that stuff. That was gifted world building and no one can take it away from him. And that's what elevated the property. But he also crashed into the same wall. People applaud the Jeff Johns era, but they don't remember for some reason the fall off of sales began while Jeff was still writing the book because even he could not sustain. And he was one of the people running the company at the time, and he still could not sustain because the concept of a person with a magic ring that can do anything their will dictates. You got to really be clever to come up with real enemies for them to fight that aren't Galactus every week, right? It was fun looking at the Silver Age stuff because he had villains like Sonar,
Yeah.
Goldface, which is a dumb name, but
The Tattooed Man.
right, Tattooed Man. Hey, the Tattooed Man was great because these were people that could give him a run for his money within the context of
Yeah.
where he was and what he was doing. But the bigger you make him, the bigger his enemies have to be. So,
I,
it's like you say, it's an arms race.
right. I feel like that's almost endemic of a lot of what goes on with the big companies. Which at least I do love these characters. Like the Green Lantern, love Green Lantern. But so even with Batman, when can he go back to just fighting regular bad guys? He's like,
Exactly.
Gotham's been doomed every issue for like
Yeah, why is the fate of Gotham? Every bank robbery is the
right,
fate of Gotham. Can he
right.
catch a serial killer? Can he just catch one serial killer? Right. Well, that's the thing. But you have the circular situation with a lot of, and I think vocal, but maybe not the majority of fans. What you want is a good Batman adventure, right? And for that to happen, the enemy must be someone that could plausibly win. You have to believe that, is he going to make it this time? You know, even though he obviously is going to make it because it's James Bond and he's going to have another movie. Inside this story, you have to believe he might lose an arm or his best friend gets killed or something real is going to happen. And if you make him the guy who's got a contingency for everything, that he can beat Superman hand to hand, no, he can't. He can't. He's Batman. Stop it. You know. But when you're on the book and when you have an editor that likes you kind of get to do what you want, and the company may have desires as well, right? Do something really epic now because we've got the Superman movie coming out, or do something really epic now because Marvel's eating our lunch with Thor for some reason that came out of nowhere. So let's jack up our guy to godlike abilities, and it accumulates because the fans become more and more addicted to the canon, what they think of as the canon.
Yeah.
And there's new fans that come in, and the only Superman they've ever known is the one that can eat a sun. So it's like, well, what are you doing? Depowering? He's always been this amazing. No. He's going back to 1930s levels. just do that. What's wrong with you? You don't know Superman like I do.
Right. And it's funny when people are like people get so upset when it's like, what do you mean Batman can't beat that guy? Of course he is. Like, who cares if he can? He's Batman. He's cool on his own. He's not cool just because he can beat up some other
Right.
bad character.
Well, this goes back to the uniqueness. Like a perfect example of this is who can win in a race, Superman or the Flash?
Right.
The answer is the Flash. Speed. Because if Superman can beat the Flash, there's no point to having the Flash.
Right.
Right? Superman is a Swiss Army knife, and the Flash is a very specific kind of blade.
Yeah.
Right? So yes, Superman can cut, but he can't cut like the Flash because that's why we call the Flash. We need the Flash, right? Same with Batman. He might not be able to take all these guys in any way hand to hand, but he can outthink 100% of them.
Right.
In the context, in the Justice League context. Wonder Woman. Okay, Superman's stronger than her. Superman has more abilities than her, but she's a better actual fighter than he is because who has he ever had to fight?
Right.
Right. Like who? I mean, there's famously Muhammad Ali taught him to box, right? But Wonder Woman's from a culture, a martial culture that's been literally teaching its children to fight for thousands of years against mythological creatures. I'm sure she can handle Superman.
Well, that's a great point. When you talk about Superman, they're like, well, he's super genius too. It's like, why? He
Why?
has to use his head. He just pounds his way through. That's all he has. When you do that,
Right.
you'd be pretty mentally flabby on some level because you never had to think your way out of a box.
That's what I used to say about Spider-Man. It's like, why is Spider-Man in such good shape? If he has amazing spider strength, all he's really doing every day is hauling his own body weight around Manhattan or whatever. So sure, he'd be in really good aerobic condition, but he wouldn't be jacked like that. Why would he be jacked? Like,
Well,
be skinny,
well,
right?
going back to Green Lantern, for a guy who has a ring, he's pretty jacked. I mean,
I'm like, well, I secretly Hal is making the ring make him be jacked.
oh.
I don't have to work out. The ring just works me out when I'm
he's
sleeping.
an egoist.
Yeah. Well, don't get me started. But that's a whole TED talk. But
So,
anyway.
So going to what we're going to focus most on is when we talk about like the Blood Syndicate, you're working with Milestone Universe. So
Yep.
thinking about the nice thing about Milestone is that because the characters have a much shorter continuity in history, there's a lot, and because they're less known
Yep.
in the in the wide audience, you can kind of do more what you want to do with those characters.
Yes and no. One, again, like yourself, I've been reading comics for a long time, and I was a big fan of Milestone version 1. I own 100% of their catalog from the first time around. And of that catalog, Blood Syndicate was my favorite book. So it's kind of weird that I got to write it in the first place, but I basically let it be known to the powers that be, you have to call me if you ever do another Blood Syndicate. I'm not saying you have to give me the job, but you have to give me the opportunity to try to get the job, or I'll find you at your homes and there'll be one of us or both of us will be on the news that night. But in terms of having to, there are pluses and minuses. The fan base is, but it's much more intense because there are people like me who are like, oh, I remember when this happened and nothing's happened since, 1990, whatever. And oh my God, it's coming back. How are they going to screw this up? You know what the vibe is on the internet anyway.
Oh yeah.
So my feeling on that was it's almost like the dog who catches the car. I was kind of like, I really wanted this gig. They gave me this gig, but now there's this big responsibility to try and get it right. And what get it right means might not be the same for every person. For me, it was honor the spirit of the original, but you can't transplant 1990 anything into 2020 anything. The things that are going on in our culture are just massively different. Some of them are the same, sadly. The sort of the negatives, many of the negatives are the same, but there are many positives that have happened in the intervening decades that were not true when the original Blood Syndicate came out. For instance, just being gay, just being queer in the world. It was a whole different shot in 1990, whatever, than it is currently, right? It sucks in some ways. Definitely, definitely there are aspects of our society that are still out to get the queer community. But it's not quite as weaponized as it was back then, and there are many more tools with which to fight back, and many more allies that are openly like, nah, leave these dudes alone. No, right? So, and ladies, and non-binaries. But so there was some question of how to approach it. Also, there is I don't want to say nostalgia because I'm very much anti that, but there is a sort of a vibe of purity. So the original Blood Syndicate sort of drops you in the middle, and you're sort of playing catch up, and it's just run and gun basically from the page 2 on constantly. And I was like, well, I don't want to duplicate that exactly, and we kind of already told that story. So why not leave that largely intact and tell the how did they become the Blood Syndicate? Because in the original, there's only 2 sentences devoted to how they became the Blood Syndicate. Was it the Force Syndicate and the Paris Bloods merged after the Big Bang to become the Blood Syndicate? That's literally all of that you ever get. And I was like, well, that sounds like a really interesting thing to know about. So that was sort of the impetus for modern Blood Syndicate. It's not a one-to-one. Holocaust was part of the gang, obviously, in the original version, and he starts out very much their enemy in this version. But I listen, it's a needle to thread, it's a delicate confection. I was having Chris Cross be the person to do the art was a godsend. Like both from a fan perspective, but also from a design perspective. Who better to redesign characters that he had a hand in their design? Like, so go Chris. Yay, Chris. Actually, I owe him. I have to read something that sent me in trouble.
Well, I think what you did interesting with the basically the trade of Blood Syndicate is that just going back to what we just talked about the idea of superpower and godly powers. You have Icon, you introduce the character and you say he's there because you can't escape the fact that there's a Superman running around.
Right.
But you give a reason why the story can exist without him, because you said he basically, like you would think of Superman, he's dealing with these macro problems. He doesn't have a micro sense of what's going on the ground. So that's
Correct.
the fun syndicate. That's also why you don't worry that they're not as strong as Icon, because if they were, they might be worried about global problems. They're worried about what's going on Paris Island. I think that's
Right.
a brilliant way of I don't know the right word is writing out Icon, but explaining, yeah, he's there doing his thing. This is why
Look,
he's not going to impact the story.
he lives in Dakota. It's across the bridge from Paris Island. If Superman lives next door to Doctor Doom, he's going to have an opinion.
Right.
He's going to show up about it. So we had to, it was we went back and forth of all of the things, probably the biggest me and the editors and the owners went back and forth about is how are we going to deal with the Icon question, right? I didn't think it was that he's always busy elsewhere. That as a fan irritates the crap out, right? But the Rocket character grew up on Paris Island. Her family still lives there. She has a secret identity, so it's not perfectly known who her folks are or anything. But so if you make the Blood Syndicate really only concerned with the goodwill and the welfare of Paris Island, they do not care about anything else. They are like, you guys don't give a crap. You don't give a shit about us, so fuck you too. But don't cross this line or there'll be problems.
Right.
Okay, we're not expanding, but don't fuck with us anymore. Right? Okay, that settles them. They're not going to be running around doing world conquest crap, which takes them off anybody's sort of global board. I mean, certain paranoid people will be like, but they're right off the coast of the United States. Yeah, but they're not doing anything. Leave them alone. So there's that conversation. But from an Icon point of view, okay, fair enough. You know, I live right next door, right? You can't get what's so crazy, right? And to which the Blood Syndicate would say, oh, I feel we could get as crazy as we want, Icon. You come over here, we might have something for you. Like right now, we're kind of unformed, but it isn't even that tense, right? And I thought the solve was Rocket because she's from there. So he leaves it to her. I've lived centuries on this planet. I've seen things like this sort of pop up from time to time. It doesn't generally end well, but it also doesn't automatically end poorly. So you make a good case, crazy gangster who has superpowers. Lady who lives with him, who's much more connected to these streets than I will ever be. what do you think? Right? And her response I thought was natural. What? Why are you asking me? To me, right? Which is what a normal person would do. Um, but yes, it takes Icon off the board in a way without in any way diminishing Icon, and also reminding the audience Icon is a long-lived alien presence on Earth. He has an outsider's view of every conflict. No matter how much he identifies with you or whatever, he's literally a different species. So some point he's going home theoretically and leave all this to us. So other human, this is a human problem. Make your choices, right? Because I'm still here to drop the hammer if you get too out of hand, right? So it was a fun solve, and I was glad that they agreed with it.
Is there any thought when, as especially as the Blood Syndicate as characters, when you know there is a character like Icon who can put a thumb on you if he wants to, and to know that there's a danger there?
Well, the thing that I thought with them was two things. Um, I have a thesis, and it's not just me. The bad guy in a heroic story must actually be better than the hero. They have to be better equipped, smarter, stronger. They basically, or the hero has no fight.
Yeah.
Like the hero has to be overcoming great odds. And that if that's a person like Magneto, they have to be pretty badass for the entire X-Men team to have trouble with one dude. That dude has to be pretty damn badass, right? Same thing with Icon and the Blood Syndicate. One of the things I had to do was remind people you don't have to be stronger than Icon. You just have to be smart about Icon to take Icon out. So we've established that he can get sick if you have the superpower to come up with a virus that can infect him. It's not going to take him off the board forever, but you don't need him off the board forever, right? Here's something fun. One of the things that we had to deal with the whole Paris Island Holocaust conundrum, I'd written a very complex scenario for how Holocaust was going to keep Icon off its back, which was basically, look, you're fast. You definitely beat me in a stand-up fight. Definitely. No chance I can beat you in a stand-up fight. However, are you fast enough to kill me? Because you're going to kill me before I erupt a volcano in the middle of that island back there. How fast does my power work, Icon? Was who's going to blink? You can make your move, and I don't mind dying if I know Paris Island's going with me. If I was you, I'd kill me. What will you do, superhero? What will you do with all those innocent people over there at risk? They were like, that's fairly us. By the way, previous to that, I had Holocaust killing the hell out of a whole bunch of people. Like, oh, you think I'm bluffing? All those guys in the other bridge, dead. All those people over there, dead. See those people in that plane, dead. I'm not fucking around, Icon. That was the conversation. Like, yeah. I can do that quickly. You've seen how fast I can do it. Can you kill me before I do it to Paris Island? Right? There was a lot of back and forth about that. And the basic thesis was Icon can't be face down in that way because he is ostensibly Superman. Yeah. So that problem would not solve the Icon problem. It would temporarily solve it, but not really solve it. Right. So that's when we came up with the idea of Perdita, who I'd already introduced by name earlier. I was like, all right, well, Perdita has the ability to create viruses, remake her body into any virus she wants it to be, which means when she's inside you, once you breathe her in, just somehow her power must work like, I don't know, but seems like it would have to be able to analyze the host and go, oh, here's what will fuck up the host. Yeah. Right. So it doesn't matter who the host is. So Perdita is actually fairly powerful, but even in the comic, Icon says, my body will shake this off. Right. And then Holocaust says, yeah, or she gets one lucky and she kills you. I'm good either way, because now we know you can get sick. She just make up something that makes you sick the next time. Fuck off, Icon. Right? Right. So, I mean, these are the kind of things that I hope when you have an OP character, you have to be clever as a supervillain in order to confront them. You know, Green Lantern's ring can make anything he can think of who can beat him, a person who can disrupt his thought. Right? The Flash can outrun anything who can beat him, a person who's smarter than him. where it doesn't matter that you're that fast. You can be as fast as light. It still won't matter because I've already planned for all this shit and you're not that fucking fast. Right.
Right.
And then he has to use an ability that he doesn't usually use. Right. I'm not Batman. I'm the guy who really quickly wraps stuff up. I don't know how to solve this really problematic, what do they do? He tries every possible solution, but he does it so fast that it looks like he did it instantly. But like you could trigger a system that's like, okay, that's great, Flash. You can try every number combination. The problem is with my bomb, if you try more than 3, it blows up. So you don't get infinite. Sorry about it. Right. You have to think like that. Right. So so it was fun with the Blood Syndicate. And also in the original Blood Syndicate, they Icon beats them technically, but they handle their business with Icon too. Like they're not a threat, and that's before the goddess shows up, I think. Like, forget, there's 2 people I weren't able to put on, 3 characters I wasn't able to add to the team. Dog, Kwai, and DMZ. DMZ is theoretically roughly equal to Icon in physical power. Kwai is a goddess, so I'm guessing she could go toe to toe with him. Dog's dog, whatever. But and we don't know what the upper limits of Third Rail and Brickhouse's power sets are. So Icon would be, what do we used to say? You can come for the fight, but you better bring a lunch. You're going to be here, right? That would have been like, once the Blood Syndicate got its shit together, Icon would have a hard time just stepping in there and squashing, right? He would take lots of damage doing that, even if he won. So anyway.
Well, one of the things I think was very interesting that you did, especially in the first couple of issues, you showed the allegory between the fight in Paris Island and a war that was being fought in, I can't remember what country it was.
Sadak, yeah, Sadak.
And it had me thinking, one, that's an interesting parallel between the street fight and the actual war that's being fought with the soldiers. And 2, also had me thinking about the problem of collateral damage as well, which is you can't fight a war without collateral damage. And Blood Syndicate now has that problem, especially with fighting someone like Holocaust. He's going to cause collateral damage. You can't, if you're going to fight him with someone, even the Icon's going to fight him, he's going to fuck up a lot of shit as long as you push him hard enough to make him have to do it.
He does not care. He literally does not care. Like, I'm here. I'm the only person here. All you other people are here to make me happy. If you don't make me happy, gone. That's it. That's Holocaust in a nutshell. So yeah, and no one else really drew this parallel, which I thought was fairly obvious. So cheers to you. You are a smart cookie. You're a smart cookie. Yes, the Middle Eastern thing was not chosen just to make the 2 guys soldiers. It was to draw the parallel between street violence and the kind of crap that goes on in theaters like that, military theaters like that, and who is ultimately responsible for that violence. So given a going Blood Syndicate book, those themes would have been brought more and more to the fore. It's also not an accident that the woman who becomes Iron Butterfly is the woman who inspired Wise Sun to become a Muslim. Because at some point later, those 2 are going to meet up again. And he knows she's got superpowers, but she doesn't know he's got superpowers, right? And what kind of Muslim did he turn out to be, right? There's lots of kinds of Muslims, another thing that most people don't seem to remember, right? So that would have come up. But collateral damage was a big thing. It's one thing to knock over a power structure. It's a whole other thing to become the power structure. Like basically the Blood Syndicate at the end of the first season, they were calling him, says, we now run this island. There's a bunch of 20-somethings and teenagers. We now are in charge of this island. We want to do good things, but our training in doing good things is military and gangsterism. So you tell me how that was going to play out. How easy was that going to play out? Right? The Blood Syndicate they're not superheroes. Kept trying to make that point in the book. They are not superheroes. There's no, it's the Joker. There's no Joker again. Like when we catch the Joker, we solve that problem that day.
Yeah.
There's no court. There's no due process. There's no, he had a chemical imbalance, and if we could just keep him on his meds, he wouldn't be a homicidal maniac. We don't care. He killed all those people. Goodbye, Joker. There will be no returning Jokers on Paris Island. There'll be one time you get to run as long as you run, and then we get you and you're dead. That's it sounds great to be able to solve problems like that. But if you're the person at the top who's making that decision, what I was trying to set up was Wise son, who died early in the original Blood Syndicate. He was my Captain America character, right? And the idea was that he was essentially going to become, whether he wished to be or not, king of Paris Island. And increasingly having to make tougher and tougher decisions about how to keep it the way he wanted it and to make it safe for everybody. And it was unpleasant. He hated it. And these are not, they're not bad people. They're not good people. They're people. So once you're in charge of things, that's going to affect your personality differently. There are perks to being in charge that you maybe never considered. So someone you thought of as an ally might not be now, because I get a lot more babes being in charge of this section of Paris Island than I used to when I was just some dude. You know, I'm not sure I want to give that up in favor of the babes having better rights. Maybe I don't want them to have more rights. Do they have to have more rights? Who can stop me? Right? These are the kind of questions that would have come up, or just an argument amongst the Blood Syndicate. Who says you're the boss? I didn't elect you. You just claim the bossness of this? Who says? And then you'd have one of those great comic book fights where it's Storm versus Cyclops for leadership of the Blood Syndicate, except, again, the Blood Syndicate takes no prisoners. Like, if I beat you down, you're going to the hospital for a while. It's not like, oh, you knocked me out, you won, you're the leader. It's like, I took your arm off. I don't know if it'll grow back. And if it doesn't, tough for you. You shouldn't have a fight with me. I told you to leave me alone. Right? So that's what the mix of the Blood Syndicate, I believe, was and should be. Yeah. So if we ever get to come back to it, that's some of what you will see, is that it's easier to break something than it is to build.
So being that some of these characters were soldiers, does that make them either, maybe that's the right word, more comfortable with collateral damage, or does that make them more sensitive to collateral damage?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, ironically, the character who you would think would be the most casual about it would be Wise Son, based on his personality and his upbringing. He, of all of them, was the most hardcore gangbanger prior to going into the military. But the woman who convinced him to become a Muslim, that situation that allowed for that sort of opened his mind up about a whole bunch of things, where he's kind of, what my goal with him was to slowly turn him into Golden Age Superman in spite of himself, right? Like, he's got a very bad temper, but he has this real desire to be good in the world, according to his new faith. What does that mean, right? And it's hard to walk a straight line according to a Judeo-Christian paradigm. Most of people who adhere to those faiths don't. It's hard. I'm not saying that they're weak for failing to do it. It's wicked hard to be an actual Christian. It's really hard. You don't get to have anything. You don't get to make money. You don't get to fight people. You have to take every punch. You have to give away your food to the hungry person, even if you yourself are hungry. Most people aren't doing that. They're just not. Okay, I'm trying to eat, man. I know I'll just take it up with Jesus when I die. He'll be fine, right? He'll understand. The Lord will understand, right? But that's not what the book tells you to do. So if you're trying to be fundamental about anything, right, it's going to get harder and harder in a modern context to do so. That's Wise Son. And how does he learn to be a good moral man and be an adherent of his faith? By the way, I'm not a Muslim. I don't have any particular feelings about Islam one way or the other. I just was like, this is an interesting question to watch a person go through, right? You have an outspoken Muslim woman in the middle of this conflict that her country did not buy and is stuck with, basically saying, we were just sitting here being scholars and living our lives, and some of us wear the hijab and some of us didn't. Some of us did this and some of us didn't. But we weren't starting trouble with anybody, and look what we got, because you two fuckers can't get along with each other, right? That's going to leave a mark on a guy like Wise Son, because he questions he never thought about before. Just never thought about it. Whereas with Tech Nine, what I try to draw, I don't know how well I ultimately achieved this, just because of the nature of the medium. What I was trying to draw was a parallel between Holocaust upbringing and Tech Nine's upbringing. They both grew up in the same streets, roughly the same time. But what you notice is Holocaust dad was prominent in his life, and Tech Nine's father was prominent in his life. But there's no mom in, at least none depicted in Holocaust life. So if she's there, she's essentially silent. It's dad driving for him. And you see the ruthless lessons he was being taught at a very early age. Whereas with Tech Nine, his family was a unit. His mom and dad were together. His dad was like a tough guy, but not a stupid guy, who wanted his son to kind of walk the line. And you see him as a kid taking punishment already for trying to walk the line. And so by the time he's an adult, and the mom and dad are like, family looks after family. So whoever you consider family, you must look after them. You must look after them. It's not spoken in the story, but the reason they joined the army was Y-son was in some deep shit. And if the cops had caught him that night or anytime soon thereafter, he's probably going to prison for a long, long time, whether he did the crime or not. He was amongst the people who did it, and he's a known gangbanger. So he's going to take that hit. So you need to join the army. You need to join the army. It's the only way out of this, dude. There's no other way. I'm not going. I can't do that. So you know what? I'll go with you. I don't need to go. I'm not a member of your stupid gang. But if it's what it takes to get my friend out of this, I will do it. And they go into the army together. That's the backstory there. So when they come out, Carlos is Faye. Ronaldo is Tech Nine. I believe that's right. He looks at Paris Island and goes, "What the hell? And who's this guy? And what's happening? Oh, no, 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 no. That's the family. I got to look after the family." And we tried to very hard in only 6 issues to get this across. Did we win? I don't know. I think we got a lot of it across. 100% probably not. But
well, I think it's kind of interesting with Hannibal, like I said, being that in war he finds is the Islam religion, but when he comes home, that's a major dividing point for him and his family. And assuming his family then are Christians who should be accepting inherently, but it's immediately basically the end point of the relationship is that he converts. So what does that suggest about the people he's protecting that they're so quickly going to kick him out?
Well, I think what we're trying to get at, and it's like this, the Milestone universe, at least in its first iteration, and I like to think in version 2 as well, it's trying to make people of these sort of largely what would have been caricatures in the media, right? So I'm not a big sympathy for the devil type of guy. I don't generally write villains where, look, we got to understand Magneto, he's a racist butcher and mass murderer, but go through the Holocaust. So let's give him, I'm like, well, don't finish that sentence. What are you saying? No, you stop with the first part, right? Anakin Skywalker murdered a school. First of all, he murdered an entire village of people who did not mess with his mom for people who mess with his mom. And then murdered a schoolhouse full of children before he becomes Darth Vader. But he loves his son at the end, so we can forgive him his past mistakes. He can't. No, we can't. There's no walking that back. What are you, high? Oh,
that'd be a funny conversation right at the end if right before Vader's fight, he goes, "Oh, by the way, did I let you know that killed a whole bunch of children?
Yeah.
We're good."
What? And then he gets to be a Force Ghost right next to Obi-Wan. What the hell? Oh, no, sorry, bad move. But in the case of a lot of these kind of characters, there's a stereotypical viewpoint of them, right? So what I was trying to do with my version of the Blood Syndicate was all of these people come from the same basic neighborhoods. All of these people come from the same basic economic background. Almost none of them are white. Like only Boogeyman is white. And I didn't create that. That's the way it was. And he's not even really in the book yet. And you get to see how did growing up in these streets affect the behaviors and thought processes of all these various characters, right? Some of them became hyper-violent, some of them became criminals, some of them became soldiers, some of them became activists. The Y-son of the Fade character is kind of becoming a street activist, right? He's looking out for people. And why is he looking out for people? Partly because as a child, Tech Nine's mom and dad looked out for him against his own bigoted father, right? So it's like neighborhoods are families, boroughs are families in a large, they tribes in a way. If you're going to create that atmosphere for Paris Island, a fictional place, you have to really shore up the underpinnings of how family and tribe really work, not the way we're told they work. And it's all emotional bonding, right? What would have happened? Like I wouldn't say my favorite issue, but the issue where we go back into Holocaust life, tracking his life from childhood to the present. Every chance he could have gotten to learn the right lesson, he did not.
Mm.
So how much of that was his environment? How much of that was him? Right?
Mm.
Same thing with Tech Nine. He got kicked around by life a little bit, but like we haven't even gotten to the fact that neither of his parents are in the picture. Like no one was there to say, don't go to the military with this guy. So whatever happened with his folks, they are not in the picture by the time that decision is made. And yet somehow he came out Captain America. And it wasn't because of indoctrination, right? He stands up to Icon, who can easily kill him, and says, here's what's going to happen on my island, big man. Here's what's going to happen, like it or not. If you have a problem with it, they got my back, right? But that's upbringing. It's how did your parents, how did your environment shape you? How much of it was nurture? How much of it was nature, right? So, and all the way, like the bit where they're like, why didn't you guys call the cops? And then everyone laughs at him. Like the entire rest of them was like, what are you, stupid? It's Paris Island. What are the cops going to do? Right? But they didn't all become criminals because of that.
Right.
Right? So these subtleties generally don't get applied to these kinds of characters, certainly in comic books. And I thought the original Blood Syndicate did a really good job for that time period of doing so. So we tried to do the same thing now.
So, well, an interesting question when you talk about criminality, when they basically set their claim and say this is our island, we're going to, inherently they're going to put themselves in a position of authority, which inherently is illegal to do in a territory.
Oh yes.
So how does the government are they going to how are they going to take the fact that a group of people are saying, yeah, we own this island? I was like, wait a second, government doesn't give up shit.
Come back season 2. Come back for season 2. Yeah, everything that was the open question. Icon signed up. Who the hell's Icon? He's
Right.
not a government figure. He's just a really strong dude that nobody can mess with. All Icon says is, I won't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Okay. But the government's not sitting still for that. Of course they're not. So what do you have to do, Cuba?
Right.
What do you have to do? Right? What do you have to do, Taiwan? What do you have to do?
Right. And the other thing that could pop in my head as well is that there's also a difference in fun is not the right word, but maybe of interest between fighting a bad guy and administrating an island. So, I mean, that's got the fun factor of now this is your island, now deal with the problems of it is a lot less fun than just a bad guy go punch him. So,
Right.
are these characters ready to deal with the administrative difficulties
No,
of running an
they're
island?
not. They're absolutely not equipped. So if there were a season 2, and I don't know that there will be at this point, but if there were a season 2, then those questions are very much the meat of that. How are we solving these problems? We are a bunch of 20-somethings with little or no organizational understanding, or like we're winging it basically, right? Like the 2 soldiers kind of know how to set up a military village. Like if a platoon rolls into a town and takes it over and makes the plumbing work and do all that stuff, they can do that sort of. They kind of know how that works. But this isn't that. You're not an occupying force. Theoretically, everyone in Paris Island is like you, like in the sense of you're all citizens of Paris Island. Do they agree that you're in charge? Do they want to not be Americans anymore? Did you ask anyone? Right? Like these are the questions that are going to come up. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that these guys basically came out of gang life. So it's gang life is might makes right.
Right.
So you bit off a lot. Now let's see if you can chew it.
So,
right. And yeah.
So from a listener standpoint, like I said, it's pretty bold to have Blood Syndicate season 1, which implies a season 2. How can the listeners push and make sure a season 2 happens?
Push DC, push Milestone. I'm raring to go and come back. Obviously, I introduced a lot of things that did not get addressed, characters that haven't shown up, plot lines like what was that flash forward where everyone's fighting everybody? What was that? Where is DMZ? I know. Will you ever find out? I don't know. You need to tell DC and Milestone that the Milestone universe needs to stay alive. You brought it back, now you need to keep it alive.
Hmm.
Like you need to. Um, I can't do anything. They know my wishes. They know the basic outline of what I was going to do for season 2. Um, and there's been no motion in months. Not that I know about. Maybe
Hmm.
somebody knows about it, but not me. Um, I don't know. I just don't know the answer. So what y'all can do is Twitter, Instagram, um, snail mail, if people even use that anymore. Bug them. Tell them you want it. If enough people say that, then it'll come back in
Hmm.
some form. I wanted to write the Shadow Cabinet. I introduced them as well, which had not really been done yet. There's a whole lot of stuff going on in that universe that answers a lot of questions about both Marvel and DC, DC to a larger extent than Marvel, but still both. They have a problem with using marginalized characters. They don't
Hmm.
seem to know how to do it. And here you have a ready-made universe of all of that. People by and created by people who also wish to do that. So there's some conversation about it being a sort of ghettoized universe. And I'm like, not really, though, because everybody's in the Milestone universe. It's just that they're centering different ethnicities and different
Hmm.
orientations than the mainstream so-called. But since DC ostensibly owns Milestone now, like I keep going like big eyes and
Yeah.
like it's kind of like, duh, like keep going. Now I don't know what the sales were.
Yeah.
It could be as simple as not enough people bought the books. But again, if the internet makes enough of a stink about something, they'll do it
Hmm.
just to shut everybody up. They don't want any of that smoke. So I say, yeah, lobby them. Tell, figure out who the editors were, figured out who whoever the current editor in chief is.
I assume is it Dennis Cowan or?
No, well, see, Milestone is an interesting thing. Yes, they can keep going on their own, but I believe that their deal requires them to go forward in comic book form anyway with DC.
Gotcha.
So if DC doesn't want to do it, Milestone can want to do it all they want to. But they can make TV, they can make animated, you do all that stuff, but they can't make comic books without DC Comics.
Hmm.
So, you know what I mean? So, what I would say is it's a weird thing to say, but it's really if enough fans demand it, you'll get it.
Hmm.
You
So
just yeah.
so what's next for you?
What's next? X-Force. Currently,
X-Force.
I'm writing X-Force, a new version of X-Force for Marvel, and something I cannot talk about in animation, but which will very much be on everybody's radar when it happens. Um, Actually, two things, both NDA protected, sadly. But yeah, X-Force. And X-Force led by Forge. It's a new kind of X-Force with a new mission. Um, it is just a delight to write this. Um, it was not pitched as an X-Force project. It was pitched as a Forge project, and the editors were like, "This is X-Force," and I'm like, "Okay, call it what you want, But it's Forge, Captain Britain, Ascani, Rachel Summers, um, Sage, one of my favorite characters, Surge, apparently a character that has not gotten much light on her, which I've always liked her. So I was like, really, nobody likes? Okay, well, she's in this book now. And a character called Tank, who is the group's tank. Like it's no shock when you see Tank. That's why we call him Tank. And what is his job? He's the group's tank. So, um, and they're doing something different than what X Force has done for a while. Um, the original X Force was Cable sort of turning the New Mutants or elements of the New Mutants into a more ruthless strike force than the Xavier X Men because they weren't willing to get their hands dirty enough. And then there was another version of X-Force, which became Ecstatic under Mike Allred, and I forget who his partner was. And they were off just doing wacky Mike Allred stuff. And then there was an X-Force where they were just loose because Cable was gone and they were just wandering around doing stuff, sort of like the real world of mutants. And then for a really long time, they were the Kill Squad. Like for over a decade, whoever was writing it, they were the Kill Squad. And it was Wolverine and Deadpool. I think Omega Red was on the team at one point. It's basically a band of killers running around killing people who needed killing, right? And I was like, really into that. So our guys are Forge. Forge figured a way. I don't know if he figured it. He did something to his own superpowers that allows him to see something he was not aware of before. And the thing that he's aware of now is how the world is very much fractured in sort of a space-timey, Doctor Who-y kind of way. And if we can go to the places where there's going to be a really bad fracture and seal it before it pops off, that's an Armageddon that doesn't happen. So they're just basically running around the planet, not caring about national borders or checking in with anybody because they have to do it quickly. They just show up, handle their business, get the hell out of Dodge. And he assembles the team he thinks is necessary for them.
So when that comes out, are you ready to come back on?
Absolutely, anytime. That comes out August, either July 31st or August 1st. I can't remember. It's either the end of July or it's literally the last day of July or the first day of August.
So I'm gonna be battling you in August for you to come back and talk X-Force.
Oh, show. It is. They're calling it From the Ashes because the whole Krakoa thing is over with. And it's funny. I've watched a lot of the commentary. I guess about there's a lot of people they all feel some kind of way about Krakoa, right? Oh, it should have went on too long. What were they thinking? It was all stupid. Like Krakoa was the most beautiful, perfect thing that has ever existed in reality. How could you let it go? How could you let it die? Right. So, and they're all lining themselves up to hate us, who are the From the Ashes era, because either we're continuing Krakoa pretending we're not, or we hate Krakoa and we're going to dance on its grave and move forward in this other direction. And I'm like, really? Those are our only two options. Those are the only possibilities for From the Ashes with 9 books that are being offered in the first 3 months. That's all we can do is one of those two things. No. So it's going to be fun. I mean, my X book is not one of the marquee X books. So it's, there's X-Men, there's Uncanny X-Men, and there's Exceptional X-Men. Those are the 3 marquee books. Everything else, X-Factor, X-Force, Wolverine Solo, Dazzler, Storm, they all have their own books, but they ain't X-Men, right? We're getting, Tom Brevoort is like, go flex your thing, right? There should be a version of X-Men for as many people as there are who like X-Men. We're not we're all coordinated in the sense that we all know what the others are doing. And we definitely are not. We're coordinated enough we can't step on each other's toes because everyone knows what everyone's doing and when. But we're not so coordinated that we're working in sort of we're all going over here and one day we're all going to fight Apocalypse in 20 issues. No, we're not. No, absolutely not. Right? There will be occasional crossovers because it's comic books, but it ain't like that. It's going to be a fun ride. I think it's going to be interesting. Some of the books will rise, maybe mine will. Some of the books will fall, maybe mine will. But it definitely isn't going to be what you saw the last go around, good or bad. Whether you liked it or hated it, it isn't going to be that. So we'll see.
Well,
I'm happy.
It sounds awesome. Like I said, in August, I'm going to be bothering you to talk X-Force. So
Hit me up. Hit me up. I love talking about these damn comics.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. As far as I can tell, there's nothing for you to cut. So unless you're cutting for time, anything you want to cut for time, go for it. But I'm good.
All right, perfect. Like I said, this will go out. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Verge of Stars podcast. Please help me battle the algorithms by liking and subscribing. Be sure to turn for the next episode when Peggy Lou boards the mothership to discuss Venom: The Last Dance. Until next voyage, travel on.